I'm here really to talk about kind of how important people are to content production and content distribution. How many people here, just so I know who's here, work in social media, are practitioners of social media? Okay. And how many of you grew up knowing you wanted to be a social media practitioner? No one. Well, we have a lot in common. Neither did I. I thought I wanted to be a journalist. As Edward R. Murrow, this idea of being a journalist was, so fascinating to me. I grew up in the DC area, and I want to make sure it's working behind me. And my mom was a public interest lobbyist. Okay, so I don't know if you guys had a lobbyist as a mom, but she thinks in talking points. She never gets off her message, and she's hanging out with people like this who are senators and bringing by the House, and presidents, and I kind of saw what she did. She was in front of the camera. She, when I say a public interest lobbyist, she fights for kind of people who don't have anyone to fight for them, minorities, women, basically everyone but me. And so I said, I don't really want to do that, even though that's incredible what she does. I want to be a journalist. So I went to Northwestern University in right outside Chicago. Any Northwestern people here? Great. We've few Northwestern people here. And so I enrolled in the Medill School of Journalism, which basically lets you take 4 years and study how to write and how to report. It's a very difficult school, okay? So our exams have titles like News Writing Final Exam. Okay, these questions were really, really hard. This is an actual question from the final exam. Who is John Wayne Bobbitt? Okay, does anyone here know who John Wayne Bobbitt is? Okay, so you guys know. This was my actual answer. I dug this up in creating this. He had his penis severed by his wife after she said he forced her to have sex. He was acquitted of charges that he sexually abused her. Needless to say, a divorce is well underway. Okay, so those are the kind of exams. Now, this exam, you'll notice acquitted is spelled wrong, and I got an F. Okay? I got an F because I know this guy had his penis cut off, but I spelled acquitted wrong. It's called the Medill F. So I didn't like that, but one of the guys who I really got to know is this guy, Marshall McLuhan. Okay, Marshall McLuhan was in college, one of the most influential people in terms of my learning and how I put together my thinking about life. And when I look back on what he did, he was an incredible visionary. He's someone who really saw the times we're living in today back in the 60s, just to give you a flavor of what he was talking about, specifically portending the internet.
Our own world, we are hurrying back and forth across town at morning and night to situations which we could quite easily encompass by closer. Why do the wheels keep hurrying us downtown? Some people are puzzled by this and have come up with the answer. It's the pilot cabin. Downtown in the offices that makes it still necessary to rush back and forth from suburb to office. That it is this obsession with the contents of the file, documents, contracts, data. All of these materials actually could be just as available on closed circuit at home. The stockbroker long ago discovered this, that the telephone enables him to conduct his business anywhere. He doesn't have to hurry down to the stock exchange.
So in 1965, he's talking about this thing called the internet. He doesn't even know it's the internet. But he did have books, and he writes a very influential book called The Medium is the Massage. People don't know that he misspelled message on the cover. It went to the type print, okay? It came back, and he said, leave it. Like, how great's that? Okay? I would have, if it was like in the middle of the book on a page, I would have reprinted the whole thing. Okay, this is on the cover, he makes a mistake. But what matters is his belief that we are shaped more by the media in which we communicate and the medium in which we communicate by the content of the communication itself. Okay, so it's how we communicate. The medium is more important than the content that actually flows through it. So when he gets this typesetter mistake back, he looks at it as, I like it. The medium is the massage, right? It's massaging us. It is the message, that's why he wrote the book, right? Like that is what he meant. But it's the mess age. He spoke about how this, although he was forward thinking, he kept talking again and again about, I want things to stay the same, right? So he saw it as this mess age, and it's really the mass age. So he was a student of media, and he saw how, the Egyptian hieroglyphics, led to, a few hundred years later to the Chinese inventing paper in 105 AD. And then 1,300 years later, the printing press. So the time between changes in media are taking like thousands of years, right? All of a sudden, they start to accelerate. You have the movie picture, camera. You then have Time Magazine, launched by Time Magazine in 1923. And less than 50 years later, HBO by Time Inc. comes out. And then from there, we know the rest. It's accelerating. And what's happening is the first 2,000 years of media was all about the where. You had to build a website, you had to do something in a magazine, you had to create an ad. And those media companies were the gatekeepers between you and consumers. And so it was a series of one-way push messages that started with the where am I programming it in these silos all over the place. And that was for 2,000 years, and all of a sudden blogs came along. Anyone could launch a blog, like myself.
And you can at least like the Giants more than the Jets, because the Jets suck. We'll pay you $500 if you become a Patriots fan. Maybe, yeah, I will. Okay? Yeah.
Miles, my older son, say, I'll get my money from my dad for this. But no matter how stupid the content is, people are now publishers, okay? You could put the content out there, which changes the game. The problem is that it's still limited from a social activity standpoint. It's one way, and even the comments you're getting aren't very significant. Even today, you put out stuff on your blog, you get a lot more reaction elsewhere. So all of a sudden, these social platforms launch. You have Facebook that puts the people in the middle. You have Twitter that puts the curation of your content at the middle. And all of a sudden, brands, publishers, celebrities, retailers, individuals go direct to consumers. They have the ability to start with what is the content I want to get out there, and then go to where. How do we distribute it? So what am I going to say? What is the big idea? And then how are we going to get out there? And all of a sudden, the publisher, the media company, the brand, the celebrities, they're no longer what matters most. Okay, so for the first time, it doesn't matter that this is the New York Times, this is the Wall Street Journal. It's all about how people are taking it. So even the content you put out doesn't matter most. What matters is the engagement you get. It's not about what you throw out there, it's how people catch it and run with it. Content that gets no engagement is not content, it's dead. Okay? So media companies for thousands of years tell us what to think. Now we tell media companies what to think for the first time. I mean, imagine if this happened with Twitter. Imagine how the only thing you would read about was this event and how instantaneous it would spread through the world, which is basically what happened last week. Okay, so when Whitney died, we all found out about it through our phones, whether it was email, Facebook, Twitter, CNN breaking news. The first person to tweet this out was this person. She is the niece of Whitney Houston's hairstylist. Okay? This was 27 minutes, as Mashable reported, before any media outlet reported on this, or the first tweet went out. OMGG. Okay? She would have gotten double F at Medill. Misspelled OMG. My Aunt Tiffany, who works for Whitney Houston, just found Whitney Houston dead in the tub. Such a shame and sadness, sad face. Okay? It sat out there, didn't get any retweets. Now, a day later, she's complaining about the Grammys. So she's back to like her normal content creation of the Grammys was a waste of time. I want my 3 hours back. But this isn't just a tweet. This is a media company in the body of this young woman. She's on Tumblr, publishing often. This is in January. I didn't want to use the Whitney Houston content here. She has 500 people engaging with this content. Most New York Times stories get a small fraction of that. So all of a sudden, the people are involved in the same way that Marshall McLuhan said they would be back in 1965.
The audience can become involved in the actual process of making a hair, then it's happy. It's like the quiz shows. They were great TV because they gave the audience a role, something to do. They were horrified when they discovered they really didn't laugh out all the time because the shows are great. Now they listen to horrible misunderstanding of TV on the part of the program.
It was great TV because people had a role. And it was a missed opportunity because they were phonies and the people programming the content didn't understand the medium. Which is pretty incredible when you look back to 1965 and what has happened today. So how do we as businesses, how do we as publishers really get behind this idea that it's the people that is the message, not the medium or the message itself? Look at Warby Parker. How many in here wear their glasses? Okay, so at least a dozen people in here wear the glasses. $95, free shipping both ways, the lens and the frame. You can't get that anywhere in New York. You can't even get the lens for $100, at least if you have really bad eyesight like I do. But they go one step further because it's not about selling glasses, it's about doing good in the world. So you're not just buying a pair of glasses where you can do it Lens Crafters for probably less money, but you're giving a pair. You're joining a movement. And how do people engage? 100,000 pairs of glasses were donated. Okay, 100,000 glasses were donated to people who can't afford glasses. 33 photos are posted to their Facebook page every hour on average last year. Okay, 33 per hour for the whole year. 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. And 56 mentions per hour on Twitter. So we're starting with the idea. They didn't start with the, oh, I got to create a TV ad, I got to create a website. I have an idea, and I'm going to take that idea to the world. Okay? If they can go from 0 to 100,000 pairs sold in basically a year or two, those of us with assets can do a lot more, like Amex. Small Business Saturday, great idea. Let's help the other half of the GDP, the people who run these businesses. Let's shift all the attention from people waiting outside Target and Walmart to helping your local businesses, which basically means helping your neighbor and giving them some help. They launch it, and last year, 27% increase in sales at the stores, the small businesses that accept Amex. That is not a coincidence that that program and that number are aligned. If it went from 08 to 09, maybe, but 10 to 11, I don't think so. Now, Ford, they've revolutionized their business around social. Now, they improved their products, so the first thing they had to do. So they got their product lines in order. Now, all of their marketing rotates around people. It doesn't mean it rotates around Facebook, as I'm going to show. It doesn't mean that it rotates around individual platforms, but they are very, very people-focused. So they say, listen, if we get enough people sharing the Ford Mustang page, we will reveal the 2013 Mustang. This is a very aspirational car. They have millions of fans. People love seeing what every year or every time they come out with a new Mustang, it's a historic moment for a lot of Americans, a lot of people around the world. And so 14,000 shares later, basically in a day, they reveal it. Okay, so share and we'll give you something. But it's always on. So Valentine's Day, They're putting badges out on their website and promoting it through Twitter and Facebook and everything else. Their TV spots now are no longer just, here's how awesome our car is. It's actually real people talking about the cars. So they capture that content, and it's the people talking to other people versus Ford talking to people. After basically politicians, people trust ads the least. Okay? They trust their friends, strangers. There's a whole hierarchy of people they trust and organizations. The company itself, they actually trust the least. Now, this is happening across every industry, this reorganization around people, putting people at the center of how you look at your messaging. So you look at Dove, which is a soap. Cleans your body. It's a great soap. I've used it since I was, I don't know, I remember always having Dove in the household, so at least 6. They're on the wall in Facebook. They're in Twitter. They're publishing the right content at the right time to the right people based on what they want. So this is, if you show up to the Dove page from the States, if you show up from Belgium, you get completely different content. Different messages, it's in their language, which is half the battle. Like, you can't connect with people unless it's in their language. And you compare this to what most companies are doing, even companies with great assets, great content. The NHL has dozens of games a week. They have players. They're in the public consciousness. You show up, and they only publish in English. Okay? Now, this leads to a 6 times engagement for a soap company versus sports league. Okay? You look at 5.5 million fans, 320,000 people in the last 7 days when I took this screenshot had talked about or engaged with Dove. Okay? NHL, 53,000. Even if you look at some of the best content out there, that should say, well, it says Lady Gaga. Dove has a 5x engagement rate than Lady Gaga on Facebook. And why? Right content, right language. They're out there programming content for people and not for their company. So you were in control as a media company, as a brand advertiser, for a very long time, until you weren't. And the problem with blogs is you weren't in control, but if all of this stuff's happening at 100,000 blogs, you're not only not in control, but there's really nothing people can do to really hurt you. So you go to a blog, hey, this is the worst story ever. I'm going to get all my friends there. 3 people and your mom show up. Company doesn't even notice. Okay? Fast forward to Facebook and Twitter. If they can overthrow the Egyptian government, which should not have been overthrown, it was 35 years. Like, that was they had complete control of that country. They can overthrow your business. So we've gone from you being in control to no one being in control to people being in control. Okay? So they shape you as a company, as a publisher, as a person even, as a personal brand, which we all are. Whether you admit it or not, you have your own brand that you're putting out there. You are shaped by people around you more than you can shape them. So meet Musa Tariq, one of my favorite people in social media. Does anyone know who Musa is? So we're at a social media conference. He's one of the top practitioners of social media. Okay? He works for a very old brand, 156-year-old brand called Burberry, as the global social media director. He has gotten Burberry with his team up to I think it's about 12 million fans. You can look at it. When I took this, it was 10 million on Christmas Day this year. Twitter is close to 1 million now. They've totally revolutionized the business and reorganized around getting the right content to the right people and letting people control the brand. Now, it's great that they have 10 million fans or 12 million fans and 1 million followers, but what does that mean for the business? So since joining, in 2009, May of 2009, the Burberry stock price has gone up over 400%. Now, can I say it's all because of Musa Tariq? Of course not. Great products, great messaging, retail strategy, digital competence. Across the organization, they have reorganized. But is it a mere coincidence? I don't think so. I do not think it's a coincidence that their stock price went up 400% from the time he was hired. He's not alone in doing the work, but it's a big part of how the company started to think about it. Now, on the flip side, meet Reed Hastings. Okay, you guys probably know Reed Hastings. He raises the price of his service, and people go crazy. This is July of last year. And then a few months later, he divides the business into streaming and at-home DVD, calls the DVD service Quickster. Seems to be the slower of the two, but calls it Quickster. People go crazy. Now, the issue I have with this isn't that it was a bad business decision, because it was probably the right business decision. Reed is one of the smartest people I've ever met. He's one of the most philanthropic people I've ever met. He's given a lot of money to education. And the business decision was sound. The social strategy and how they took it to the people couldn't have been worse. The Twitter handle was owned by a self-professed pot-smoking guy. I don't know where he lives, but he's like, oh, I own this. You know, he wakes up, sees in the media, Quickster, I got the Twitter handle. Everyone's trying to follow them. Okay, so then it gets even worse. Stock tumbles, they lose 800,000 members, and rich people like hanging out with rich people, so Reed's out in Wyoming, and in October posts to his Facebook page in Wyoming with 10 investors at a ranch/retreat. I think I might need a food taster, because he thinks he's going to be poisoned. I can hardly blame them. Okay, so he's putting that out as the company has frozen for weeks. They lost 800 subscribers. You do the math, you know how much that costs. And between the time they announced the price hike and the end of the year, 74% decrease in the stock price. Okay? Now, is it a coincidence? Is it causation? Who cares, right? They could have handled it better. It wasn't handled the appropriate way. So they ditched the plan, and $10 billion, so it's 3 weeks later, and at this point, by the end of the year, $10 billion of market cap have been wiped out, and people had shaped Netflix. Okay? They'd shaped Netflix and made them change their business, said, we don't like this, go back, change it, and wiped $10 billion of shareholder value. Okay, so this stuff isn't just a game of incrementalism where, oh, you should tweet and be on Facebook because it's cool or innovative. It's part of that. Like, people buy innovation. You have to be where people expect you to be. But this is really shareholder value stuff, which at the end of the day is what matters to, you know, our bosses, your boards, your shareholders. So if you look at some of the great minds of our internet generation, you look at Ev. Okay? Ev is the living reincarnation of Marshall McLuhan. If you look at how he speaks and go back and look at how McLuhan spoke, it is the same person. And if I had a picture of Marshall when he was younger, they look alike. Okay? He started Blogger, which people forget. This is the first blog ever on Blogger. It's his. When you start it, you could have the first one, number 1. You see profile/1. Okay? 300,000 viewers just to that. And then he went off to start something very small called Twitter. Okay, Marshall McLuhan said, we shape our tools, So we, the people, shape the tools, the mediums, which he spoke about, and thereafter the tools shape us. Okay, in a very Frankenstein type way. We create the tools, and then the tools create us. This is what Marshall McLuhan said. Let's hear what Ev says.
Twitter was originally designed as pretty much a broadcast medium. You send one message and it goes out to everybody and you receive the messages you're interested in. One of the many ways that users shaped the evolution of Twitter was by inventing a way to reply to a specific person or a specific message. So this syntax, the @username that Shaquille O'Neal's using here to reply to one of his fans, was completely invented by users. We didn't build it into the system until it already became popular and then we made it easier. This is one of the many ways that users have shaped the system. The other
So he's talking again and again about like the people being in control, and that's led to the realization of a lot of these beliefs that the people are in charge, whether it's government, business, celebrities, entertainment, media, people are in charge. So he talks about like we shape our tools, like he shaped Twitter, and then they just put it out there, and Twitter shaped the world. So the question that we all have to ask, and what I focus the most of my time at Buddy Media on, both from a strategy and a tools perspective, what we build and strategies for our clients, is how will people shape your business? It's a fundamental question about the communications landscape that we live in today. How are people going to shape your business? Are you going to be proactive and engage and give them content, tools, services to shape your business? Or are they just going to do it without you? So if you're fortunate, you give them the tools to grow your business like Twitter. If you're unfortunate, you either give them the tools or you don't, and they shape your business and ruin it. If you're lucky, nothing happens and you just grow your business. So if you can answer that question of how do you shape the tools and the content and the internal organization, okay, to empower people to shape your business, you will succeed in not only social media, but media communications, advertising, and growing shareholder value. So with that, that's really all I have to say. I can take a few questions, but thank you. Any questions? Or disagreements? It's the first time I've ever given this talk. Yes, in the back.
Great talk, first of all.
Thank you.
How do you reconcile, I guess, not having to be perfect, not having to, spell acquitted correctly, but how do you reconcile that with the tendency for people to create really crappy content and then hope that it works? I guess where's the balance between authenticity and starting conversations and engagement and low quality?
So, well, first of all, just in terms of like making mistakes and like making the wrong decisions, people like flawed people and flawed businesses. Okay, so you look at a picture of Bill Clinton here. He was impeached for screwing around in the White House, but he's like the most popular president, right? He walks into this room and everyone's like, oh my God, you're like the baby Jesus of presidents, right? He was impeached and he made so many mistakes, right? Then you look at Tiger Woods. Now, Tiger wasn't in the Oval Office, he was in his own house, right? He's Tiger Woods. Like, is it that surprising that Tiger Woods was having an affair, right? Like, his problems, he had too much money, he was too good at golf, and he was good looking. And he had, I guess, he was on the road and had tons of free time. Now, we went after Tiger, and he's now one of the most hated sports figures, not because he had an affair, but because he was a phony. He was the quiz show that was rigged, as McLuhan talked about it. And so, and how many of you have friends who are like, make a ton of money, are perfect looking, have like the best kids, and like the best marriage? Like no one, because we hate those people. They're like the worst people that you ever want to hang out with. Like we like our people with cross eyes, and having flaws, right? And I think that if you can expose some of that vulnerability, even if it's a misspelling, like my final exam in news writing, like, and I was pissed at the time. I thought my life was over, right? You get an F in college, and this was early in college, 93. It was like my second year. I thought, oh, how am I going to tell my parents about this? Like, I'm going to be like working for, the Detroit News and not the New York Times. But at the end of the day, like, Marshall did on the front of his most famous book and went with it, which is why I love it. It's like, okay, I made a mistake. Fuck them, right? Like, I love it. And so I think if you put out content that is flawed by nature and, like, it's not the best, but it's raw and it's real, people respond to it. If it's fake and phony, then they don't. Now, when you're doing paid media, like the Ford ad, you have to package it. You can't just like put out like YouTube ads. So, that's packaged people. It's real people, but talking in a packaged way. And I just think there's so much, every year the amount of data flowing through our networks doubles, which is why we're never going to have high-speed broadband, because they're building better networks, but we're doubling the amount of data we throw into it. It's like air, right? Like, give us 10 times the data capability, and we're doing like 5-way live FaceTime with watching 3 movies and playing a video game all through like an iPhone app, right? We fill it up. And I think that, we're in a world where there's so much data that like whatever you put out, it's just not that important. Even if you're accurate and put out that like Seinfeld ad, like that got 17 million views on YouTube, which is pretty amazing for their long version, the 2-minute version. That clip is not even pissing in the content ocean. So even if it sucked, it's like, okay, move on. What are we doing tomorrow? Cost us 30 million, but. Any other questions? Sorry, that was a long answer. There's one back here.
Great talk. So my question, though, is really when it comes to employees, right? Because you look at it as customers are helping to shape business. But it seems like so few companies are looking at their employees to help them shape their business or prevent Twitter or Facebook from being viewed in their own company. So I just love your point of view on, do you see that being a movement for companies now that they're going to start to kind of ask their employees to help reshape their business and their business model? Or what's your point of view on that?
So, I mean, my main point of view is that we all have content networks and social networks, which is basically a virtual representation of our real life relationships, either as an individual or a company. And there are many different actors in that play and in that ecosystem. You have the official company messaging, paid, owned, and earned media. You have employees, you have vendors, you have competitors, you have all of these different people in there. And I think they all, whether or not you as a company engage them, they have a voice. And you're better off empowering them. Like what we do at Buddy Media is we don't require anyone to tweet or Facebook message or that, but we're a small company, 250 people globally in social media, so you're going to say, oh, it's a social media company. But you'd be surprised like what people say across any company. And all we can do is educate them about how to use these tools. Here's what we're doing as a company. I treat our employees like they're our board of directors. So we have quarterly meetings where I actually present to them results. And some of it's confidential information. I just say, please don't use your Twitter machines on this. And the more I empower them, the more they feel like it's their company. And I think what companies, they make the mistake of saying like, you are not worthy of Twitter. Well, like who isn't? I mean, you saw like a lot of these examples of it's like, who isn't worthy of Twitter? Everyone. My 10-year-old, kid Miles, he's not on Twitter, but he has an account which will go and he wants to he thinks it's funny to send messages to family members through it. And the other thing that's kind of hurting that argument of like you got to lock down your employees is mobile. So yeah, you can't, like a lot of our clients, you can't get on Facebook. Like I'm doing 10 p.m. phone calls because like some of our clients have, like they get home from work, they're with their family. They can't do it during the day. They get home, they're with their family, put the kids to bed, and then like, okay, I got to do my Facebook stuff at 10 p.m. Like, how happy is that employee? Right? At 10 p.m., I have to do a call with his social media marketing system vendor. Not happy. Like, that person's not going to be there forever. No names will be named today.
Great talk. Thank you.
Who's talking?
Thanks.
Okay.
I've
There,
heard
there you are.
Sure. I've heard from some corporate leaders and executives that they're afraid of opening up a two-way conversation with customers on social media because they're concerned that the customers will have something negative to say about their company, and they'll have to acknowledge those negative comments in a very public, uncontrolled environment and respond to them. So what would you say to those executives if you had to convince them that they needed to open up this two-way lines of communication and get into the social sphere?
I would say you're going to be fired at some point in the future. I don't know when. Two, even though you're not engaging, just do a search on Twitter. It's happening anyway. So you don't have a monopoly on kind of bad messages, as a company. Every company has these. You may have a lot more if you're certain brands, but it's happening. And by not responding, you're doing two things. One is you're saying you don't care. It's just a big kind of like, I could care less about you. That's what you're saying. And then the other thing you're doing is you're giving up a lot of like social media juice. Like when you respond on the Facebook wall, you could just say like, thanks for commenting. They respond, no problem, you suck. And then you're like, sorry. Facebook sees that as engagement, right? And then your who's talking number goes up, and your Facebook Edge rank scores go up. And the next time you post something that says, hey, we have a new product, all of a sudden that's getting through to people in a much higher rate because you've separated the signal from the noise using engagement as a weapon. And so there's both kind of existential issues that I would go after with them, like you will not exist at this company, and like on the ground data that's like, companies that engage will see X higher percentage. I have the number, I don't have it off the top of my head, but companies that actually respond on the Facebook wall and on Twitter have an order of magnitude higher engagement, which at the end of the day, that's gold. Like those engagements like scores are what gets you through the noise, because Twitter, everything gets through. Facebook, nothing gets through other than the engaging stuff. Eventually, everything looks closer like Facebook because it has to be filtered. Like, no one noticed that message about Whitney Houston. So for 27 minutes, it's out there in the world. Like, that's a crazy idea. There have been studies to say, like, they've taken the same crossword puzzle and given it to people the day of versus, like, a year later, and people who've never like done, never seen the crossword puzzle, and people who take it after it's been out, do better. It's out there in the world, right? Like the information's out there. So that's another rambling answer. Thank you.
Oh, Mike.
Yes.
That was great, Michael. I actually really liked your point on comparing Ev Williams to Mr. McLuhan. I don't think that's done enough, so that's the first time I've seen it in a presentation. That was very cool. And of course, I think a lot of people giving Jack Dorsey a lot of credit now with Twitter. I think Twitter is important to the overall global village of our world, so hopefully Evan stays very close to the product. To the kind of world we live in, I think we all try to channel McLuhan in our jobs and our products. You spoke to the point, and one of McLuhan's famous passages, of course, talking about the content doesn't matter. We work with a lot of big brands. We were talking with a brand the other day that has over 20 million fans on Facebook, and they said, we only know what we're going to talk to our fans about twice a week. We only say two things. What are you going to do this weekend? And then on Monday they say, what did you do this weekend? And of course their engagement numbers are through the roof. And part of me cringes to think about that, but at the same time, does the content actually not matter? And what is Facebook's responsibility? Clearly, Facebook has big competitors like Twitter and Google, and they know they need to be a media company in the sense that they need to distribute people to third-party sites, so linking is very important. But just want to get your thoughts on Facebook as a media company, and how do they measure engagement? Is it about what people are clicking on, or is it if just people are writing on the wall?
Yeah. Well, if you're in social media, you know how I think of Facebook. I am accused of being their biggest fanboy. I love Facebook. It just makes my life better, and that's why I started focusing on it, because I just really like the site. I don't like talking on the phone. A lot of guys probably don't, so it just lets me keep in touch with a lot of people I actually like a lot. I just fell out of touch with. You know, Facebook's a media company, so the underpinning is technology, but it's a media company. Okay, Ford is a technology company, but it's a car company. The industry is autos. So we're in a world where basically you are who you are as a company. How you engage with your customers is up to the messaging that you put forth. Now, Facebook's a great product. It is they have the world's personal information revolving around what they're doing. Ultimately, how they evolve is going to be critical to how I think democracy, capitalism, free market spreads around the world. It's one platform with 1 billion people, and so knowing the senior management very, very well, they know how important they are to the world, and as is Twitter and some other ones. We'll see. Pinterest, I had to talk about Pinterest once today because every other thing talks about Pinterest. So I have to either wrap up or wrap presents because she has a sign. So I have to go, but thank you. I'll be hanging out here and enjoy this next panel, which is awesome. So definitely stay for the panel because they know a lot more. Thanks.